Welcome back to Iceland. If you haven't heard the latest episodes from this beautiful country, maybe you should go back and start there. In those episodes, I take you to some unpronounceable places, and in the latest one, I introduced you to 3 locals. A couple, Helga and Asbjørn, who invited me for coffee and a great view, and Alda, a successful Icelandic author with 11 books under her belt, and many of them about Iceland. In this one, we continue our chats, I have a little language school for you, and overall we have a lot of ground to cover. So let's get started.
This is the Radio Vagabond.
Welcome to the Radio Vagabond.
If travel is your passion, and you want escapism while still upholding your work and family responsibilities, you can travel vicariously from the comfort of your own home.
Let's start back at the city hall, right next to their playground, so you'll hear a bunch of kids in the background. This is where I speak to Alda Sigmundsdóttir, a successful author with 11 books published so far.
Let's dive a little bit into how the Icelandic people are different. And for that, I've looked at some of the headlines from one of your books. And in one of them, you have a headline saying, appalling driving habits.
Yes.
See, I've been driving for 3 days now, and people drive nicely.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you're lucky. You haven't.
Yeah, I just came from Kenya, Uganda, so yeah.
I see, yeah. I think our driving culture has improved quite a bit over the last decade, I would say. But even so, I learned to drive in Canada, and I get very annoyed. One of the things that Icelanders are known for example, is not using their indicators.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they'll put on the indicator after they've made the turn, like I've just made a turn here. And that's one thing. They don't know about how to, stay in the right lane and then pass in the left lane. They just drive all over the road.
I think you're being harsh.
You think so?
I think they were driving nicely.
I don't know. I have a lot of foreign people backing me up on this.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I know there's one diplomat who I knew here who had driven, he'd been posted in Greece, he'd been posted in Africa, and he said he'd never encountered, driving as bad as here. And basically what his reasoning was that, in these countries, and I've been to India, I've seen how they drive there, for example, but you know it's going to be chaos, right? Yeah. Here in Iceland, you expect it not to be chaos, right? Yeah. But it is.
Yeah, even I was driving in Saudi Arabia, and especially in Riyadh, the capital, if you have a 2-lane road, it would normally be 3 cars beside each other, and they were just moving like ants, and like you see in India, but it's totally different culture, but it somehow works.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I like to think then that our driving habits are improving and have improved. So that's good to hear.
Yeah. Okay. And then another one that caught my eye was that Icelandic people have a fear of commitment.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think as a nation, if you get to know Icelanders, and I like to quote a friend of mine who is Australian and who actually illustrates my little books. Her name is Megan Herbert, and she lived here for 5 or 6 years. And she used to say, if you ask an Icelander to help you move, and if the move is 3 weeks away, they'll never show up. But if you say at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, can you be there at 5? They'll show up on the dot, they'll get it done, no problems. Because we are so used to, and I think it's just bred into our DNA, we had to learn how to be flexible, back in the days when we lived with an incredibly harsh and unpredictable climate, and which our climate is, of course, and our nature. Yeah. So let's say, you were planning to go to church on a Sunday, and the day was incredibly beautiful, and it was a good day to dry the hay. Then you'd off church, and you had to do that, and the same thing with
maybe it's just part of the DNA after that.
I think so. Yeah. I do think so.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So that part, is that also why Icelandic people make what was the headline? Social interactions really complicated. That caught my eye.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Icelanders, sort of by and large, I think tend to be homebodies. And that, I think, is something that is also sort of inbred from way back when we had to spend so much time indoors. And they're also incredibly house proud, so they really like to, and spend a lot of money on their homes and have everything really nice. And they like to sort of show their neighbors that, I have a nicer this than you do, or, John down the street has a new whatever, Lexus, I better get one too, kind of thing. Okay. Yeah, so when Icelanders sort of get together, and when I grew up in North America, for example, if you wanted to throw a party, you basically just said to everyone, okay, there's a party at my house, 8 o'clock on Friday, bring your own booze, and I'll, throw some snacks into a bowl and then call it a party, right? Yeah. The Icelanders, they do not do that. So
they host,
exactly. And if they throw a dinner party, for example, it has to be a 3-course meal, and they have to have sort of white wine with a starter and then red wine, everything absolutely perfect. And there's a lot of effort, let's put it that way, put into entertaining.
Interesting. Do you also have what we have in Denmark, the famous hygge? Do you do a lot of candle lights and stuff like that?
Yes, and we talk about hygge a lot. I would say when sort of come September, when it starts getting darker and the weather starts getting rainier and everything, then yes, people do like to sort of coop up inside their homes and put on candles and all of that. So yes, definitely I think we have that from you.
While hygge is famously Danish, the Icelanders also embrace a similar cozy concept in their own way. In case you don't know what hygge is, it's all about creating a warm, comfortable atmosphere and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. Think of it as a feeling of curling up by the fire with a good book, surrounded by candle lights, or sharing a wholehearted meal with close friends on a cold evening. It's not just about the physical coziness, but also about an emotional sense of commitment, connection, and well-being. For Icelanders, this idea aligns beautifully with their lifestyle, especially during the long, dark winters. They find comfort in snug interior, meaningful conversations, and share moments of joy, all while embracing the harsh yet beautiful elements of their environment. So it's like hygge, with an Icelandic twist. And just for the record, it's hygge, not hygge. Hygge. This episode is brought to you in part by this website called hotels25.com. If you're a regular listener, you have heard me mention this before. And I can't say this enough, this is a cool website. It helps you find the cheapest hotel rooms around the world. Hotels25.com. You should try it out. It actually works.
He's the Radio Vagabond with tales at every face, charting maps, unknowing man. He's got it made. These vagabond shoes, they're blazing his crusade. Every step, every story, gotta keep moving.
Around the time of the global financial crisis in 2008, Iceland was suffering more than most. It was one of the worst financial crises in modern history. Their banking system completely collapsed. It was like a financial house of cards tumbling down, leaving Iceland on the brink of national bankruptcy. The trouble began when Iceland's 3 largest banks expanded aggressively, borrowing heavily from international lenders to fuel their growth. Their combined assets ballooned to about 10 times the size of Iceland's entire economy. But when the global financial crisis hit, these banks couldn't pay their debts and the international credit market froze. In a matter of days, the banks failed, wiping out huge amounts of money and causing chaos in the economy. The crisis hit Iceland hard. The currency, the Icelandic krona, nosedived in value, making imports more expensive and giving them a crazy inflation. It was dark times for the country. people losing jobs, savings disappearing, and many families finding themselves unable to pay their mortgages.
It was bad. I mean, I could get into the nitty-gritty details, but there are so many things. There were so many angles. There were so many rules that had been relaxed, and I mean, it had a it had a lead up, right? So the banks, our 3 commercial banks, were privatized in around 2002-03, and the people who bought them proceeded basically to hollow them out from the inside. And so when the banks collapsed in 2008, it was the biggest bankruptcy in the history of the world per capita. So basically it threatened to bankrupt the Icelandic state.
Yeah.
And compounding it was that a lot of people had loans in foreign currencies because interest rates prior to that had been very high. So the banks were encouraging people to take loans in foreign currencies. So a lot of people had their mortgages or their car loans in, euros or whatever. You could they call them currency baskets. You could just pick and choose your currency in a basket. And take a loan for whatever you needed. And then, of course, our currency went into free fall, and our currency collapsed, and people still had to pay their loans in foreign currencies. So a lot of homes went bankrupt. It was financial devastation.
But it wasn't like poverty, but it was maybe people having to leave their houses.
Yes, well, I mean, we have a very...
You could still buy food, right?
Some people struggle, and some people still struggle. I mean, there is poverty here in Iceland, and some people have actually not been able to bounce back from that major economic meltdown. So the most vulnerable groups were the hardest hit. And those are the people who were, for example, on the rental market, couldn't afford to buy their own homes.
It was many things that went wrong. But for normal people that could keep their job, it was no problem at all.
No.
But people that have been investing in banks and big companies, they lost everything. But for normal people, it was not a problem at all.
No.
As long as they got their jobs.
Yes.
And some people lost, of course, their jobs, but yeah.
But Iceland bounced back. The government let the banks fail rather than bailing them out, like in many other countries. That was a move that was controversial at the time, but it helped Iceland recover faster than many expected. They implemented strict capital controls, accepting help from the International Monetary Fund, and eventually stabilized their economy.
Now things are a lot better, and also tourism helped a lot. Are you getting more tourists now than you were, like just say 20 years ago?
2010.
It is terrible now, actually.
It is.
Yeah, it is. I don't know how many million tourists we are getting. Of course, because of the coronavirus, it went down.
You had a breather.
A little bit.
Yeah. But 2010 we had the eruption in Eyjafjallajökull.
Yeah.
Well, Asbjørn is not holding back when he says it's terrible with too many tourists. And honestly, he's not entirely wrong. Iceland, this small nation with just around 370,000 people, gets a staggering 2 million tourists a year. Yeah, you heard that right, 2 million. That's more than 5 tourists for every Icelander. This has led to over-tourism. Locals like Asbjørn and Helga might call it too many selfie sticks clogging the hiking hills. But steps are being taken to protect the natural beauty that draws all those visitors in the first place. They're trying to balance the scales, spreading the tourists out beyond the usual hotspots like Reykjavik and the Golden Circle, and encouraging visits during the quieter winter month.
The boom it began in 2010, I'd say. So we had the meltdown in 2008. And everybody was, devastated and what's going to happen to us and so on. And as I mentioned before, our currency collapsed. So one of the things that led to was that it was cheaper for people to come and visit Iceland. Of course.
Not so much anymore.
Not so much now, exactly. And this country has traditionally been very expensive and is very expensive for people who visit. So that gave people the incentive to begin to come here. And I think in 2010 we had about 500,000 people, tourists.
And you got to remember that this is a country of around 350,000.
Yeah, and I think about 20,000 of those people are actually foreigners who came here to work in the tourism industry. So, yeah. And then in 2010, we had an eruption, a volcanic eruption.
Now, do you remember 2010? That was the year when Iceland decided to send the ultimate out-of-office memo to the world.
We now have breaking news.
A spectacular site in southern Iceland where a volcano is erupting near a glacier.
A volcano erupted and threw clouds of ash into the atmosphere.
The volcano is creating rivers of lava more than 5 football fields long and sending smoke more than 2 miles high. Nearby residents have been evacuated.
Flights across Europe were cancelled or rerouted.
Tonight, travelers are stranded in all on 6 continents.
I remember I was in Spain and had to go on another flight with a stopover in Italy on my way back to Denmark.
This is the plume from the air, a massive cloud of ash following the winds and weather patterns right across the Atlantic. This is what it did to air travel in Europe from 3 a.m. to noon.
And I was not the only one.
More than 4,000 flights have been canceled. By tonight, the ash cloud, we're told, will cover the entire United Kingdom.
For a 5th day, Iceland's volcano is creating havoc in the skies.
People stranded in airports.
More than 300 airports across Britain and Europe were closed over the weekend.
Weddings were postponed.
More than 63,000 flights have been canceled since Thursday.
Business trip derailed.
Almost 7 million passengers affected.
All thanks to Iceland flexing its volcanic muscles.
And it's costing airlines an estimated $200 million a day.
Iceland became the center of global news.
We were prepared to come on the air tonight and report that things were improving, and we were expecting jets to take to the air in Europe and elsewhere after being grounded by that volcanic ash. Then came news late today that says, in effect, not so fast.
And this eruption probably did more to put Iceland on a map than any ad campaign could.
I remember that closed down the airspace all over Europe.
That's right, the Eyjafjallajökull eruption. And so everybody here panicked, Icelandic authorities panicked, like, oh my goodness, this is going to absolutely turn everybody off from coming here. They'll think it's too dangerous. Not only are we totally incompetent when it comes to our finances, to add to it, we have all these dangerous nature things going on. So,
and earthquakes.
Earthquakes and whatever. And so they decided that they would go on the offensive, and they launched this marketing campaign that they asked every single Icelander to take part in. So they made this video called Inspired by Iceland. And they asked every person in this country, please help us to make this video go viral.
And since then, tourism has absolutely exploded. So the media attention with the ash cloud and an online video campaign they called Inspired by Iceland. That's where they asked the citizens to help it go viral.
The video went viral and tourism just took off. So instead of this scaring people away, the Eyjafjallajökull eruption basically put Iceland on the map because it shut down airspace for like 5 days, and everybody then suddenly knew, where and what Iceland was.
Why can't I fly from Denmark to Italy? Oh, there's some ashes coming from Iceland. Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So that was in 2010 when we had about 500,000 visitors. And in 2018, I believe it was, we were up to 2.6 million. And of course, then in 2019, we had the collapse of one of our the low-cost airline called WOW, and of course, COVID. So, we've been in a bit of
Yeah, but then again, maybe it was good with kind of a breather, because some people say that it's over-tourism was beginning to be a problem. And were you even prepared logistically with handling so many people?
No, that's exactly it, that we were not. It happened so fast. And the Icelandic government had a real problem just forming policies. Like, how do we want to respond to this vast influx of people coming in?
You can see the Inspired by Iceland video in the blog post for this episode. And you should see it. It's absolutely stunning. And if you want to dig deeper into their videos, I've also linked to the whole YouTube channel. So go be inspired by Iceland.
This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
The video campaign had a lot to do with it, but also the ash cloud that was annoying for so many people who had their planes grounded back then, but it ended up launching Iceland as one of the hottest, pun intended, travel destinations in the world.
And then the tourists
grew and grew. Everybody wanted to see the...
Yeah, the thing that stopped travel for a month.
Yeah.
So you're really struggling with over-tourism. It's too much?
Some people don't think so, but...
Some people don't think so, but if you're going to Gullfoss and Geysir in the middle of the summer, there are people everywhere. For a few years ago, you could stand there alone.
But it's good for the country.
Of course, but some places cannot keep all this because we have to protect these places, and you can see we cannot have roads there. We don't have roads or parking places
or toilets or things like that for people, you know. So.
There are so many things we are not ready to take so many tourists. It is difficult.
Well, I just want to say I've had a good time here, and I felt welcome, and
that is not a problem.
No.
Everybody is welcome in Iceland, but in the middle of summer, when all hotels are fully booked, all parking places are full, you are struggling everywhere.
Yeah.
You have to order book a hotel room with a few months before. It is difficult.
Yeah.
10 years ago, it's not a problem at all.
No. So you're saying it would actually be a good idea if people would prefer to have less tourists when they visit to come in the wintertime?
It is much less. And of course, a lot of tourists
coming in the wintertime as well.
Are coming in the wintertime.
And I know why.
And I was a guide on the glacier and in the mountains with tourists. And I found out most of the people are coming to Iceland and they like to be in the country.
Very few people are.
Yeah, you will not be in part of...
No.
If you are looking at a waterfall, for example, and there are 2,000 people standing and looking, it is much better, and people like that. Go to the mountains, enjoy the nature, and listen. And what do you hear? Nothing.
Yeah.
No, we hear cars.
Yeah.
Here we have cars.
Yeah.
We have noise everywhere. But if you're in the mountains and there are no tourists, only a group of people, maybe 5 people, totally different.
Yeah. I was actually walking kind of on my own yesterday in one of those places. It was in, okay, here it goes. Thingvellir.
Yes.
And it was so quiet. I even believe I said in the microphone, have a listen to this, and then just let the silence speak for itself, because it was really nice. But the way that I approach a new country when I come to it, I want to see the things. I want to see the main attractions and what's that all about. But then I also want to go to places where less tourists are. And just today I've been driving randomly and stopped here and there and just got off the road and found some things, random things where it's less visited. So that's the way I like to do it.
When we come back, Alda will describe what it was like when COVID hit.
I can tell you that it was heaven for us Icelanders.
When the program continues.
Stay tuned. There's more to come.
Now, I'd like to take a moment to talk about something completely different. The Nomad Cruise. It always happens on a big, normal, luxury cruise ship. You know, with great restaurants and entertainment. And then we do talks, workshops, meetups, and just hang out with other great like-minded people. If you use this promo code Radio Vagabond in one word, you get 100 euros off the price. Just like that. The code again was Radio Vagabond. Go to nomadcruise.com and see more. They also got some great videos from earlier cruises. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to drop me a line. I promise you that I will answer any questions you might have. Find out how you can reach me by going to theradiovagabond.com. Before the break, Alda was talking about how they weren't prepared for so many tourists in the 10 years between 2010 and 2020. But as we all remember, something happened in 2020.
So in 2020, when COVID hit, I can tell you that it was heaven for us Icelanders.
Oh yes,
we had our country back. And I don't want to discourage people from coming here, and this is not anti-tourist or anything like that. But it was just so nice because, well, for one thing, we had tourism companies all over this country who were struggling, of course, because they didn't have people coming in. So they were offering these incredible deals to us Icelanders. So we could go stay at these, fancy hotels for peanuts, basically, compared to what it is usually. Because, as you know, as someone who's visiting here, accommodation, all these things is very expensive. Oh, yeah. So it was like we had this smorgasbord of things to choose from, not only hotels, but trips, hiking trips, tourism. All these tourism companies were just like, come here, bring your money to us. And it really felt like a national festival because we Icelanders were on the move that summer. We couldn't go anywhere abroad, right? So we were just on the move in our own country and meeting our own people. And the thing about the tourism, of course, is, and one thing that tourists complain about a lot, is that they never meet any Icelanders because there are so few of us. We're just so outnumbered by foreigners. And also the people that came in to work in tourism, they are working in these places. So, people who visit here hardly ever meet any Icelanders. But in that summer, it was just like we were on the move. It was like we were with our tribe. Everyone was so happy, and it was just like, it was delicious. So, and people were saying, we need to do this every 10 years. Just shut down the country.
That is the most positive spin on COVID I've heard.
Yeah, and it also helped that summer, actually, COVID was in, we were in, I think, in between phases. So we had phase one, and then that fall we got a second resurgence. So people could actually be on the move without worrying about masks and things. But then, in 2021, we're like, okay, well, we're ready to start getting people in here again because, of course, tourism really, really props up our economy. It's our largest industry.
Yeah. I guess you have a unique position because it's an island in the middle of the ocean. You have a unique position to really constrain COVID, kind of like New Zealand and Australia did by totally closing the borders, but you didn't do that?
No, we didn't actually totally close the borders, but they had a lot of restrictions. So COVID tests at the border, and then long quarantines and for people coming in, and it varied depending on what was going on. So the responses varied very much over these 2 years.
Asbjørn and Helga mentioned that they're coming from Westfjords. It's in the northwestern corner of Iceland, and on a map it looks like a giant claw reaching out into the North Atlantic. It's this rugged, remote region, almost detached from the rest of the country, like it's trying to carve out its own territory. You'll notice immediately that this is a part of Iceland full of dramatic fjords, winding roads, and tiny villages clinging to the edge of the sea. This is where Iceland goes full-on remote. It's wild, it's mind-blowing, and it's almost entirely overlooked by most travelers. It's not a part of the ring road, and only about 10% of visitors to Iceland make it to the Westfjords, which means it's your best chance to experience the country without the crowds. The roads twist and turn like a roller coaster, hugging the coastline with sheer drops on one side and towering cliffs on the other. The Westfjords are a haven for wildlife. Puffins, those cute, small black and white birds with colorful beaks, nest in the cliffs. Arctic foxes roam the tundra, and the waters are full of whales and seals. Dunyadi, the region's crown jewel waterfall, tumbles down like a bridal veil in layers, and it's every bit as magical as it sounds. This is where you come to feel like you're standing on the edge of the world. No traffic, no tour buses, just you, the mountains, the oceans, and a silence so profound that it might just make you forget your Instagram password. The Westfjords aren't for the faint of heart, But if you're willing to brave the winding roads and unpredictable weather, you'll be rewarded with a raw, unfiltered version of Iceland. It's wild, it's untamed, and it's waiting for us. Asbjørn and Helga are passionate about Westfjords. So when I asked them what to see and do when we get here, they simply say,
arrive to the Westfjords. Because Westfjords, where we are coming from, there are not so many tourists.
So get out of Reykjavik.
Get out of Reykjavik.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gravel roads are there, so it's quite different to drive.
Yeah.
But if you're driving around the island, it's about 1,700 kilometers.
And you should have at least a week and a half to do it, right?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
But
You've done it in a day.
Okay,
but there are so... Of course, it's very nice to drive around Iceland. But then you skip the Westfjords. That is the best part of Iceland.
Aha.
That's the catch.
And what's to see there, except the fact that there are fewer tourists?
You have a lot of mountains, a lot of waterfalls. You have a wonderful cliff where we come from. A lot of birds.
It's the biggest cliff in Europe, I think.
And you cannot get further west in Europe.
It's about 400 meters high, isn't it?
It is 444 meters straight cliff up.
Whoa.
Straight.
And then we have a lot of yellow sand, like in Spain. So
because here in the south coast you have the black sand.
Black sand, yeah.
There you have white sand or yellow.
Rauði sandur.
And also you have also red sand also in one place.
Yeah, yeah.
And
we have a glacier there as well.
We have glaciers there. And everything is slower actually. Yeah. But you sleep much better there. You don't need if you're in Reykjavik you need to sleep maybe 7 hours. If you're there you need only to sleep maybe 4 or 5 hours. You are never tired.
Why are you laughing?
I always need my sleep.
And it is so many things there that is different from Reykjavik. And I would say the people also, people have more time to talk, enjoy, sit down, have a cup of coffee. People are not in a hurry.
You can go down to the harbor and meet some sailors that are coming in from fishing, and
they have time to talk.
Yeah. But all over the island, it's possible to see the northern light in the right time of the year, right?
Everywhere.
Yeah. Even when we're out here, you can see it here. So, but only in the winter time.
In the winter time, and of course it has to be northern wind, -degrees, and clear sky.
Yeah, and also has something to do with the sun and the eruptions on the sun. So that's quite different.
You have to have -degrees, northern wind, and clear sky.
Yeah.
Then it is possible.
Okay. And I guarantee that you've seen it 1,000 times. Do you still get impressed when you see it?
Yeah.
Every time. Every time when you see it, you stop and you look up and enjoy it.
Yeah. And we can go out here and just watch it from our patio. So
you will enjoy them much better if you are outside Reykjavik, no lights, and then you can enjoy them much better.
Like in Westfjords.
Like in Westfjords.
Yes.
Visiting the Westfjords from Reykjavik isn't a quick day trip. The road demands your time, but the views will reward your patience. Just for fun, I created a map starting and ending in Reykjavik. The road trip is around 1,000 kilometers, 640 miles. So when I do it, and trust me, I plan to, I'll set a full week aside to do it. And maybe I'll even take 3 weeks in total and do what I call the ultimate ring road trip and add Westfjords to my extended trip around the country. I've also created a map for this trip that's more than 2,000 kilometers, more than 1,300 miles. You can find all of the maps on the radiovagabond.com in the blog post for this episode. It would take time, but wouldn't that be amazing? You want to go with me? Drop me a line on listener@theradiovagabond.com and let's make it happen. That's all for this episode, but I'll have more from Iceland.
Next week on the Radio Vagabond.
We'll hear much more about Eurovision and football, some funny Icelandic words, and what they, as Icelanders, feel about the Netflix movie, The Story of Fire Saga.
We will now be arriving at the end of this installment of the Radio Vagabond. Please stand clear of the closing doors.
My name is Palabo, and I gotta keep moving. See ya.
Radio Vagabond.
Produced by RadioGuru.co.uk.